And that really informs everything that happens at Reality Ministries is
Mm,
our starting point and how we see ourselves and one another. And that brings meaning, you know?
yeah, yeah, that's
I don't
right.
I don't have meaning because I'm going and serving, at this ministry or whatever. My life has meaning because I have learned that my life is so much richer and deeper and wider and abundant when it includes people who think differently from how I think, who inhabit the world differently from the way that I do. That's what gives my life meaning.
Mm. Welcome to the Simple Charity Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Grasso. Thank you for being a part of our listener community as we learn to love generously like Jesus. On this episode, I interview Susan McSwain, the Executive Director of Reality Ministries in Durham, North Carolina. I interacted with Reality Ministries some during the 9 years I lived in Durham, and today I do a deep dive with Susan about the challenges faced by adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities, or IDD, and what we can learn from adults with IDD about something that we all desire in the deepest places of our hearts: belonging. I hope you join me for a truly delightful conversation with Susan. You'll learn about loving adults with IDD, what it means to truly flourish as a person, and what to do when you don't feel God's love for you. This is your podcast, so as always, send me your thoughts, questions, and suggestions at brian@simplecharity.org. So glad you're with us today.
Hi, my name is Melissa, and I serve as a Simple Charity philanthropic advisor to individuals, couples, families, foundations, and family offices in the Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill area of North Carolina, but also to clients around the country. If you're curious about your own generosity journey and would like help thinking through a philanthropic strategy with intentionality to discern where God is calling you to love people, to find excellent nonprofits to partner with, or to understand the impact of your current grant making, I would love to connect and share more about Simple Charity's philanthropic advising offerings. You can connect with me at melissahall@simplecharity.org. That's Melissa Hall at simplecharity.org. And you can learn more about us at simplecharity.org. That's simplecharity.org.
Well, Susan, thank you so much for joining me on the Simple Charity Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Susan, what are you grateful for today?
So, um, today, Friday morning, I am thankful for my friend Blanche. I was just thinking about her this morning. Um, Blanche is a dear friend and a reality participant. Um, he's lived in a group home since she was 22 and she turned 65 last week.
Wow.
And we're in a reality evening group together. And last night, um, I showed up late, which is not unusual, and, really, really tired after a long day and a long week, and to be honest, a long year. And, Blanche, who I have seen literally almost every week for 16 years,
Mm.
was waiting for me as she is every Thursday night, and when I walked in, sort of dragged myself in, she was calling for me across the room, calling my name, and, as she does every single week. And, as I woke up tired this morning, I was just thinking about how deeply grateful I am for a friend like Blanche.
Mm. Amen. May we all find a friend like Blanche who's
Amen.
waiting for us at the end of a
May
hard
you be
week.
so lucky.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Well, Susan, we were just chatting before the show that I think maybe we've met once or twice. I lived in Durham for almost a decade, which is amazing. And Reality Ministries has a wonderful reputation throughout Durham and really the Triangle and I think in certain circles broader than that, as a amazing ministry for adults with and without disabilities to form friendships and communities and to do life together. And so we're honored to have you on the show as the executive director of that ministry. And I'm curious if we could start with your story. What led you to Reality Ministries, and can you just give us a sense of your journey to where you are now?
Yeah, yeah. So I never had any intention towards or experience. And uh, the first time that I ever um, participated in a group of friends that would eventually become Reality Ministries, a group of friends with and without disabilities, uh, it was just a turning point experience in my life. And this was over 17 years ago. Um, I just, it was a group that was going to the food court and a movie at the mall. And from the moment I entered the group as a stranger and an outsider, I was accepted in a way that's sort of hard to describe. The
Mm.
words always sort of fall short, but I felt this immediate unconditional welcome that I can't remember experiencing in the same way in another place before that. And I just found like I had found my people.
Mm.
um, the way that people were just fully themselves, whatever that meant, the absence of any pretending or pretension just really drew me in. Um, and I just realized this is where I want to be. And so as reality was birthed and it evolved, I was just blessed to get to be part of that and have it's been a wild adventure since then.
Yeah,
Yeah.
tell
Speaking of grateful, really grateful.
tell me about that adventure. Are there maybe a few, 3 or 4 kind of
Mm,
milestones or turning points
mm.
in this journey? Because you've been with reality from the beginning and have seen it
Yeah.
grow and evolve. So there is a beautiful story of impact and community, and I'm sure there's also a story of organizational development, of nonprofit
Absolutely.
leadership,
Yeah.
and I think I'm interested in both of those. So, uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
maybe we could start with the um, arguably more boring uh, story of organizational development and nonprofit leadership, and we'd love to hear how this organization has grown and developed over time. And then what I really want to talk about after that is what you've learned about love, what you've learned
Yeah.
about belonging, and
Mhm.
how all of us can grow in loving our neighbors, and especially neighbors who are adults with developmental disabilities. So, but we'll get there. So stay with us on the podcast. But before that, tell us about how this nonprofit has
Yeah.
developed and what it is now.
Yeah, and I would have thought years ago that that was a boring topic, but now I find it a really exciting topic
I
because
do
it's
too.
all I've experienced as a friend. But
Yes.
as I go, like, you can say, "Okay, that's enough on that. Let's move on." Because I can actually have a lot
Mm.
to say, a lot of thoughts about that. But when we started, we were sort of just a small group of friends who were, um, joined together around really not even sure exactly what it was we were called to do. And uh, when Reality Ministries was formed, its first iteration was as an after school program for um, youth, middle schoolers, and high schoolers. Not We had two different things going on. One was an after school program for middle school and high school, typically developing kids have been called at that time at risk youth, under resourced youth. And we also had a small thing going on with adults with IDD, intellectual and developmental disabilities. 5 years in, we realized, wow, we've got a lot of different things going on. What are we doing well? But more specifically, what are we called to do? And what's our particular niche in the world? And it became clear at that time that there were other um, organizations and ministries doing great work, similar to the after school program, but there was no one doing anything related to um, forming friendships amongst people of all abilities. And so we changed our mission statement 5 years in and reconstructed what we were doing, and have really been confirmed in that decision through the years as just um, the need and the opportunity is just immense um, in this area. Also, having started just as a really small group, really of friends, as we grew, we didn't always grow our structures and systems in alignment with our numbers. As we sort of started to grow really quickly in numbers, we didn't always have best practices structurally that allowed for real um, equity in our practices amongst our staff, and uh, had to learn a lot about how to really love our community and love our staff by putting things in place
Mm.
um, that allowed for assurance of everyone being treated equitably, all voices being heard well, and that's a journey that will be on forever. But I think maybe we were a little resistant in the beginning to just
The
to
systems building.
scaffolding and systems and
Yes.
protocols, and had to learn in some hard ways that the absence of those things is really not serving anyone well.
Right.
And so I think we, as a nonprofit, live in the tension between being an institution and being a community.
Yes.
So we live in that tension, but I think have been able to find ways through the years um, to embrace that and the gifts of both, as well as the challenges of trying to be both.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. Well, I'm sure that you are not the only nonprofit executive leader who has a story that goes something along the lines of, "Oh, I started doing this very good thing and serving people and then realized, oh my goodness, how do we build,
Right.
how do we think about governance? How do we think about
Absolutely.
management, project management? How do we think
And
about
how do we think
consistent revenue
strategically?
workflows? How do you
Yeah,
think
how do we not
strategically?"
just do the thing in front of us, but how
Yes.
do we really uh, have integrity around what we're choosing to do and what we're choosing not to do?
Yeah.
Saying no is one of the hardest challenges, but one of the wisest. So, yeah.
That's good. Yeah, this is, I think, an element of love that
Yes.
is, maybe I'm a parent of young kids. So I have a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a 7-month-old, and and there is an element of love in parenting to create a highly structured and
That's right.
orderly environment
Right.
for children. And I think, as nonprofits working with any population, any sort of ministry, like this is the like gritty version of love. It's head to
That's
the
right.
grindstone, learning about whatever nonprofit leadership organizational
Right.
development thing needs attention.
That's right. Right. There's like freedom is actually within the structure because that's where the
Yes.
safety is. And
Yes.
yeah. So
Yeah.
we've worked a lot through mistakes.
Yeah.
But grateful for those learnings, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, me too, me too, and my journey as a nonprofit founder. Well, let's talk about the community that you've built. So we spent, what was that, about three minutes there talking about the institution, and there's a conversation to have there. That's not the focus of this particular podcast episode. So let's talk about the community you've built. You know, I'm sure Durham is not unique. As people with developmental disabilities turn 18, leave the public school system or whatever systems they're in, what typically happens next, and what challenges do adults with developmental disabilities face?
Yeah. So, leaving the school system is entering sort of a black hole of nothingness for adults with IDD. While you're in the school system, thankfully, there are a lot of supports and resources and things available, along with the fact just of seeing other people, being around other people socially every day, having opportunities to learn. Um, and once you leave the school system, those things just disappear. The United Way released a study that said that for typically developing people, the average person, um, average adult in America has about 125 social connections
Hmm.
and like our real lives, friends that we know through school and church and work and our kids' friends and neighborhoods and all the places that we have social interactions. And for adults, the average adult with IDD, the number of social connections that they have as opposed to 125 is 3.
Oh my gosh.
And so a challenge that they have is that they're at great risk for chronic loneliness,
Mm.
which is one of the health crises of our time. Um, and in North Carolina, the funding for um, services and support in the community for adults or for all people with IDD is called the Innovations Waiver. It's a North Carolina Medicaid waiver
Hmm.
that has a certain number of slots, and people get the waiver. That's the woohoo. When you get the waiver, that's really something, and that provides funding for, opportunities to engage in the community and have support and that kind of
Hmm.
thing. So there are currently 114,000, just over 114,000 people who are benefiting from the innovations waiver in North Carolina, which is awesome.
Wait,
There
how
are
many people?
currently over sorry?
How many people?
14,000
14,000.
14,138 people currently
14,100.
enrolled.
Yeah.
Um, the number of people on the waiting list currently for the innovations waiver in North Carolina is 18,771.
Wow.
So people are on the wait list for decades. And it's not all about money because even with money, opportunities for um, authentic, mutual, dignifying um, friendships and relationships is not something that's available just because you have money, but it just gives an indication of the kind of challenges. That was the question. What are the
Yep.
challenges that adults with IDD face? Um, so
So
lack of
belonging,
resources. Yeah.
I'm hearing also navigating, even
Yes.
navigating that system.
Yes.
I find it hard to navigate America's health insurance system, and I have a college degree from Duke in public health.
No, it's so true. It's so
So,
true.
uh,
Yes.
what about employment? What's kind of the employment landscape for
Yes.
adults with
Yes.
IDD?
So adults with IDD are dramatically underemployed compared to the rest of the population. Not everybody with IDD wants to work or could work, um, but a lot of people do. And it's a really, we dabbled in employment for a short time a few years ago. We're like, oh, we know so many people that want jobs. And oh, you know, we know people that good job. We should be
Yeah.
able to figure something out. And we literally, spent maybe half a year constructing a way to go about providing or connecting people with employment. And
Mm,
it's just really, really hard. And
yeah.
that became a no for us. Like that's not going to be our purview, but it is a, it's a, it's a sore problem for a lot of people with IDD. I think we like to also name the fact that not everyone wants to work, and I think it's a little bit wrapped up in our mindset that productivity is what brings value to a
Mm,
human individual. I think we would stand in resistance to that mindset that our value as a human being is not based on our productivity.
value to the labor market.
Right.
I was reading an article this morning by David Brooks, and he said that human beings have four fundamental needs: a
Being
competence, meaning, belonging, and autonomy. And And I think he was probably pulling some from Daniel Pink, who wrote a book called Drive and talks about purpose, mastery, and autonomy as intrinsic motivators. But as I was like mulling that over, hearing you talk and thinking about this conversation, and I think most Americans are over indexed on their pursuit of autonomy and competence. Those are the ones we want. We want autonomy and competence. And I think one of
Yes.
the beautiful things that Reality Ministries is doing is bringing out these needs of meaning and belonging. And I think I'm of the persuasion that all four of these do really matter eh, for all of us to pursue and to grow into our ability. But we are so we have such a gap, I think, for most Americans today in meaning and in belonging. And we're willing to substitute meaning and belonging in order to get more autonomy and more competence. I'm curious if that resonates with you, and and I'm curious about how your community is helping people with and without
Mhm,
developmental disabilities
mhm.
experience belonging and experience meaning.
Yes, yes. Well, I would say related to autonomy, first of all, that one of our core values is mutuality
Mm,
slash interdependence. And what we're discovering is that independence is not a thing.
yeah.
Like, who's who has full autonomy
Right.
and is able to create everything that they need to live a life. Uh, and boy, um, mutuality and
Mm,
interdependence are so much more authentic and so much more fulfilling and so much more life giving. And so I think it reminds me of the whole movement, away from institutions into
mm-hmm.
group homes for people with IDD, which is a good movement. But then it really became, well, everybody needs full independence.
Right.
And
Right.
so I think that move towards independence created a lot of supported loneliness. So that's a topic that I can get really passionate about.
Yeah.
But let's talk about belonging.
Yeah.
Um,
And I want to
so
circle
and
back to group
competent. Oh my
homes.
gosh. Like I think I could get on board with that if we
Yeah.
completely redefine how we think of competence. But you asked me to talk about belonging and meaning. I think something that belonging is another core value at reality. And um, for us, it's really grounded in an appreciation for the fact that belonging is not something that we give to one another or that can be, some people are included. Belonging can kind of um, make us think some people belong and some people don't belong.
Mm,
A big word in the disability world through the years has been inclusion.
mm-hmm.
And I think the idea of that is, normal, typically developing people have something or are doing something, and then they can choose to crack open the door and allow other people to come in and be included. We're including you in our world. And I think that's really falls really far short of belonging. And reality is all about the fact that the deepest reality of every person's life, whether they know it or not, is the love of God expressed in the person of Jesus that creates belonging
Yeah.
for every human person. And so the point is we start at the same place.
Mm,
Everyone. We start with belonging.
mm.
And then the ways we do or don't live into that can be radically different. But if we're starting from a point of all along belonging for everyone, that's the thing we share in common. That's
Yeah.
the deepest, truest, most human, most real thing about us. That is true belonging.
Yeah.
And that really informs everything that happens at Reality Ministries is
Mm.
our starting point and how we see ourselves and one another. and that brings meaning, you know?
Yeah, yeah,
And
that's right.
I don't have meaning because I'm going and serving, at this ministry or whatever. My life has meaning because I have learned that my life is so much richer and deeper and wider and abundant when it includes people who think differently from how I think, who inhabit the world differently from the way that I do. That's what gives my life meaning.
Mm. I almost wonder if, like, thinking about what is a flourishing person, like, in
Mm,
our individualistic culture,
mm,
we think about just the person, but,
right,
one thing I feel like I hear you saying is, well, let's expand that to say persons are embedded in relationships. So in order to understand, we should be thinking about what is a flourishing community, and
right.
what are those relationships that are being formed. I do want to there's a couple things I want to start. So competence, I think, is an interesting one, and I think one thing that is interesting about Reality Ministries, and one of the experiences I had at Reality Ministries was going to a worship night where the band was composed of people with and without developmental disabilities, and they were really good.
Yes, yes, yes. Well, that is a great opportunity for me to talk about the Meek Squad. I don't know if
Yes,
that's who it was
yes.
the day you came, but
Look them up.
anyone listening, wherever you get your music, Spotify or wherever, look up the Meek Squad.
The Meek
They
Squad.
they now have 2 MEEK, Meek Squad, and
Yes.
it's, a little band of friends with and without disabilities who met at Reality, and, um, when we were talking about belonging, I was thinking about a song. So
Yeah.
their
Yeah.
songs, all original songs, are the soundtrack of Reality Ministries. We sing
Oh,
those
cool.
songs together, um, and one of the songs is called "Abba, I Belong to You,"
Mm,
and we just say that line over, "Abba, I belong to you. I know that I know that I know that I know that I belong." Not the very things that I think drive you away, they draw you in,
mm, mm.
and that's what is true about God. That's true about every person's relationship with God, whether they know it or not. That's what's happening. And it's also true in our community as we are down and dirty and messy
Yeah.
and sharing light in so many ways over decades. We're pushing each other away, we're drawing each other in, but at the end of the day, we're there. We're
Yeah.
sure we're community. And that that belonging to God that draws us closer to belonging to one another. Um, is is what I think allows for the flourishing of the individual person.
If I am really honest, the deepest spiritual challenges in my life come back to believing that God loves me. And my hunch is, and I can't confirm, I can't be inside other people's brains. My hunch is that that might be true about some of our listeners, no matter where they are in life, what station in life. That might be, I have this really sneaky hunch that that might be true about everyone. Um, and
No.
and so I'm curious about, um, for those of us who, or those of our listeners, and in this era of loneliness, who are
Mhm,
struggling with their sense of belonging, could you just speak a word to a listener who's lonely and who, is wondering where God is? I mean, I always go back to in First John, no one has ever seen God. If we love one another, God is, essentially present in us. Like, the best way to get to see God, to come as close as we can to see God, is to be in love relationships and in community, and to actually see the image of God in the eyes of another human being.
mhm,
And so in this era of, like, loneliness and secularization, I don't think those are unrelated. Like, I think as we are disconnected from people,
mm.
like, we actually are, it's harder to believe in God. Um, and so anyways, yeah, can you just speak a word to someone who's like, I hear what you're saying about belonging, but, I'm not experiencing that right now. Like, I don't
Right.
feel like God loves me right now.
Mhm. I think that, um our assurance of our belonging is only secure when we know that we don't belong ourselves. And the beauty of friendships with people with intellectual and cognitive disabilities is that and believing that I know that when I'm with these friends, that the kingdom of God is in our midst, that
Yeah.
we're sharing belonging. And I know that they don't have always the cognitive capacity to believe in a doctrine
Mm.
or to jump through a hoop intellectually to belong themselves to something. And so,
Hmm.
that's why I would say at Reality Ministries, we're not really based on disability theology, which is a thing, but we're living robustly within a theology that is true of every person. So, to someone who is saying, I don't feel that belonging, I don't feel God's love, I'll say to myself, as you said, all of us um, experience that loneliness, isolation, fear, dread, um, all the time. If we're honest, I don't know. Maybe everybody doesn't, but I certainly do. And um, and believing that the deepest reality of my life, whether I know it or not, whether I know it now, but I don't know it 3 minutes from now, or whether I knew it yesterday, but I don't know it next week, it's still true. And my community of friends is the best reminder of that. Specifically, my community of friends at Reality
Yeah.
Ministries with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Um, Another one of our core values is personalism, which means sort of two different things in a really beautiful way. One is that we're each unique, individual, uniquely made, fearfully and wonderfully made, nobody else like us persons. And at the same time, our personhood is what joins us to one another. That's it. Our personhood, created by God and Christ. That's what we all share. So whether we're experiencing that or not, it's true. But when we experience that shared humanity and that common um, unity in Christ, um, that's when we feel it more.
Yeah.
And
Right.
that's why I think it's really important.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, um, in our work in Simple Charity, we talk a lot about how people are made in the image of God, and I think it's also just as important for all of us to truly believe I am made in the image of
Right.
God.
Yes. Yes. It's like
Not
it's
just
like
those people out there with
right,
whatever, you
right,
know.
yes. Well, it's a gift. It's another gift of Reality Ministries. It's just the best thing in the whole world because have you ever been to the reality talent show?
I have not. Tell me,
Okay,
please tell me
so
about the reality talent show.
we have this talent show every year. In the past several years, it's been at DPAC, so a couple of thousand people
Wow.
there, and a bunch of friends with and without disabilities on the stage doing the most outrageous variety of beautiful, meaningful, profound, absurdly creative, ridiculous acts you could never imagine, right? And it's just like nothing else. It's just ridiculous. And the crowd of people are cheering their lungs
Mm.
out, like
Mm.
everybody on
Mm.
their feet, yelling, cheering, laughing uproariously. I look at it every year and I'm like, what is that
Yeah.
about? And I think it's about what you just said, which is, one of the gifts of many are, people with disabilities are not all the same. So there's not one statement you could say about every person with a disability, but many of our friends in our community are not bound by certain social conventions that we've all bought into. They're not very masked. They're not as worried about filters. They're accepting and accepted. It's just a different, like I said, a different way of seeing and inhabiting the world. And when you see that on full display on the stage at DPAC, somewhere deep inside, I think what it's telling us is that abundance is mine too.
Yeah.
Like, which is so weird because we think, "Oh, poor people with disabilities, they need to see, have a life like us so that they can
Right.
be, happy like us." But there's just something, I don't know, going on that I can't really put
I
into words.
I I I mean, maybe this is the wrong way, but I think, I've there would be for me a tinge of I don't wanna say jealousy, that's not the right word. But the extent to which I I live my life, and I think most of adults live their lives managing our masks
Yes,
and managing
yes,
our image, managing
yes,
our how we're perceived. It's
yes.
exhausting.
It's exhausting, and it starts at a young
And
age. I remember, at our annual winter ball years ago, there was a high school student who was a volunteer, you know, Macarenaing, Cupid shuffling, the reality dance is like, and I remember
a
her
little
saying to
combination
me,
of a few
"This."
different things.
Right, right, right. She said, "This is so much more fun than my prom."
Hmm.
And she was able to say, even as a, 17-year-old, "And all the rest of my life, I spend all my time working so hard to fit in.
Mm.
And this is the only place that I come where I'm accepted exactly as I am."
Yeah.
And I think that's meaning. That's what we're all longing for,
Yeah.
you know?
Susan, I feel like there's two conversations that we can have on a podcast like this. One is how can college students or Christian philanthropists or people with kind of capacity and time to give, and how can we help these people who are adults with developmental disabilities. And I think there's an important conversation to have around that. I think we live in an economy that is not built to be hospitable for everyone. There are real structural challenges, and there are real conversations we need to have about creating better systems so that everyone can actually have what they need throughout their whole lives. So that's important. But what I'm hearing from you now, and the second conversation that we can have almost feels deeper and weightier, which is how can adults with developmental disabilities help us?
Amen. Thank you. And you started off, I loved when you started this whole thing off. I was like, "Yes, you totally get it." Because you talked about right at the very beginning, and it's about people with and without developmental
Yeah.
disabilities. Like,
Yeah.
our mission statement is creating opportunities for adults with and without intellectual and developmental disabilities to experience belonging, kinship, and the life-changing reality of Christ's love. And when we talk about people with intellectual disabilities as adults being isolated and alone, I mean, it's a truly marginalized community. We have
Right.
pushed people with disabilities to the margins so that we do not even see them in our day-to-day life. And, uh, that is a tragedy for them,
Yep.
and
Yep.
it is a tragedy for us
Yes.
because we are missing out on all of these things we just talked about, all of this abundance and life and freedom and, all the other things too. Nothing drives me crazy more than people talking about anyone, but we typically would do it more with people with IDD, even if they're saying like, "Oh, they're perfect, there's angels sent from heaven, so innocent and pure." And I'm like, "Have you met, blah, da, 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 da," because yes, and, my friend Tom is also stubborn and bossy
Yeah.
and brilliant and so spiritually deep and generous and but all the things at the same time. Sorry, I'm really going off on a
This is great.
I forgot what there's
Yeah. No, I was just saying, we have their gifts.
right, for all of us.
This
Yes.
is not this podcast episode and is not about how can we give to this
Right.
community. It's
Mm.
also what do we have to learn from this
Yes.
community? And that's
That's
the idea of
exactly right.
mutuality. And
Yes.
there are like do we need like the most influential policymakers and business people and whatever to have an awareness of this marginalized community when they're building systems and determining things that actually impact real people's lives downstream? Yes.
Absolutely.
And there's a sense in which those same people, those influential policymakers or business leaders, would derive enormous benefit in their personal lives if they were in relationship with adults with IDD. And there's and th- it's almost like this community in particular has a set of gifts that touch a nerve of what so many kind of like college educated successful people are longing for. And I think it's so interesting even in this call season, like, I mean, right away, I mean, I think the first thing that stood out to me on this call is your joy. You know, showing up for a work call, podcast with this guy. This is mutuality. There are gifts that go both
Yes.
ways.
Yes. I have 2 things I wanna say about that. One
Please.
is, yesterday, I had coffee with a reality volunteer, and, she was just talking about how, it's just been so transformative, and I was like, "Well, tell me about that, like, what?" And she said, "Well, I'm a grad student at Duke, and the whole atmosphere is all about competition.
Yeah.
I mean, way beyond competence, like, being the best in my field, whatever. And when I'm at reality, there is no competition. Like, it's a totally different worldview, mindset, like, focus, way of being in that space. And that that is the gift. That is the gift that's being given, right? Like, it's just the places that we consider the elite, prestigious, what everyone is aiming for, are about something that really is not a deep soul desire. It's about productivity and competence and a lot of other
Autonomy.
things.
I did want to circle back real quick on group homes and hear your thoughts on this. I think there's a live debate. About group homes in general for well, I especially think about in the child welfare space, and there's a lot of kind of anti group home sentiment in the church. I am not persuaded by anti group home sentiment. I think just because I think when you have any sort of group home situation, it's about how the home is operated, and there's good and bad. So, anyways, I'm curious if you could just share a little bit about what that conversation is like
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
adults with IDD
I
space.
think you're right. Like, group homes are not inherently bad because they're group homes. The place where you see what's a good group home and what's a bad group home is, how do they see the human person?
Right.
Is this person someone that I'm just trying to manage their behavior? I'm a poorly trained, poorly paid individual caring for, providing care for people who, um, I have
Need that
not been
care
trained
for
to
whatever
see in a
reason.
particular way,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
so there's a lot of, um, there are just a lot of challenges with having a group home where all of those things we've been talking about over this time are centered. I
Yep.
guess it's all about what you center. But that doesn't mean that group homes are bad. And there's some beautiful, wonderful people loving really well. But it's not easy. We don't make it easy on them because we don't show a value for people who need support, because we don't value the people who provide that support, because we do not pay them enough.
Yes. Okay. That is hitting the nail on the head. I mean, I think I think there's this question of how to build, a healthy organization and institution, and I mean, I think the reality of social work in this country, and social work having so many touch points with what I would call vulnerable populations throughout this country, and it's a hard job, it's underpaid, and so many issues that we have in our country is because we of our conception of what social workers should be paid and what their lives should be like, and and
And how
uh
we value the work that they're
and
doing,
undervaluing the
and
work that
show
we're doing.
value for that.
Yeah,
And, I just was
yeah,
talking to a reality participant yesterday who finally got some funding, not alliance, but they've introduced a new level of funding that allows for some support while you're waiting for the waiver. And she finally got the funding. She hasn't been able to hear, she's had 3 case managers in 2.5 months. She finally got in touch with the third one, who said, "I'm so sorry. I have 70 clients."
holy cow.
And I'm that, so there you go.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, that's right. Well,
So many soapboxes we could go off on
oh no,
here
it's
for
good. What
sure.
this is helpful. Yeah, of scripture, of soapboxes, of
Yes.
certainly, yeah, well, let's go there. I mean, yeah, like why is that? Why is this wrong? Why should Christians care about social work? I mean,
Mhm,
I actually think
mhm,
that's a very specific sounding question,
mhm,
but it actually has a lot of implications. I think it has implications for philanthropists. If you're running a business and your goal is to pay people as little as possible and extract as much work as possible from them, I actually believe your business will be less profitable. I believe the best way to run a business is to have good jobs that acquire talented people, to treat them well, and then to allow them to perform to their utmost. So that's actually the path to profitability for a business. So okay, so let's talk about nonprofits. So what is the path to an efficient nonprofit that's minimizing waste, that's moving the needle on important issues? I think it's the same thing,
mhm,
like
mhm.
if we want organizations, and I think this is a message for philanthropists, like, I think on average nonprofit staff are underpaid. You could make an
Right.
argument in select cases that nonprofit executive directors are overpaid, and we could see cases of that, and sometimes they make the news and it's like it's a big deal. Why is this person making so much money? But the staff on average are underpaid and it's holding back the sector. And so, the notion that, like, I want my money to be going to something other than salaries is, I think, shooting the mission. We're like shooting ourselves in the foot in terms of the mission. Um, like, let's not talk about, like, and if you're a business owner, I would just say, I would encourage you to not run your business like that. Like,
Yes.
because you want to compete in the talent market. You want to compete in
That's
the
right.
labor market. So anyways, there is a soapbox there on nonprofit best
I'm with
practices.
you.
But from a scriptural point of view, we talk about this all the time on the podcast. God's heart for the marginalized, and the call of Jesus to love generously. I'm curious about, like, it's thinking about, like, churches. Like, ideally, churches are spaces of this kind of diverse group of people who are experiencing belonging and meaning together. Um, a lot of churches are kind of the same, like, socioeconomic status and, like, background. A lot of, you know, but how, in your experience, like, how can a church be a more supportive space for adults with IDD?
Yeah.
And, like, what
Yeah.
advice would you give if there was like a pastor listening to this?
Yes. It's a great question. So we talked about group homes. We had an intern once years ago make a map in Durham of every group home in every church.
Wow.
If every church in Durham invited people living in a group home to become part of your congregation, we go a long way on growing those social networks beyond those three across our whole community. But think about this. Let's say members of a group home with IDD find their way into just a random church. So let's say there's a handful of folks with IDD who start coming to a church. What's the first thing a good church, with a good heart is going to think based on how we think about this population? They're going to think, let's create a Sunday school class for people with intellectual disabilities and
Right.
give them a space, and which is saying, let's separate them
Hmm.
from us.
Hmm.
I think that I would say to a church, first, just be open to anyone who comes into your doors. Don't be afraid of them. Don't be afraid to allow them and their idiosyncrasies and their potential differences into your worship space. We have worship spaces that are so we're so committed to the service going the way we expect it to, that someone who's bring inhabiting the world in a different way has a hard time living up to that, and that's immediate exclusion. Um, I would also say if someone with a disability shows up in your congregation, um, don't don't think, "Hey, let's start a special class for these people," but think rather, "Oh, cool. What can we learn from this new
Hmm.
friend?
Hmm.
What what do they have that we need? How do we faithfully incorporate them into the life of our church? Now, that all assumes someone with a disability wandering into your church, which is not going to happen because it's a truly marginalized
Right.
group,
Right.
not just where you worship, but where you work out, where you shop, where you play. People with disability, intellectual and developmental disabilities specifically, you might get lucky enough to have a bag for you to hear a cedar. But beyond that, it's just not happening very much. So I would encourage a pastor specifically, since that's what you said, and it, change happens a lot of times based around what a pastor values. Seek out it's pretty low fruit. There are people with disabilities all around us, and even though we don't see them, they're not hard to find. Um, and to recognize how the life of your congregation could really be enhanced to greater flourishing, to find some people who are looking for community and bring them in.
Can I make a like a I'm curious if you would resonate with this advice. Um, like in churches I've been a part of, relatively small churches, pastors have like asked me to get lunch or coffee. How about if you know an adult with IDD, ask them to get coffee?
Yes. Yes. And it
Is
will
that is I mean, is that like a fair,
1000%.
you know?
Yes. Yes. My neighbor Nathan across the street would love nothing more than to take you out for a beer
Yeah,
and
right.
share so many amazing ideas he has about living in the city and church. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I've been really blessed to be in a couple of churches where friends with disabilities have been included and enveloped. So rare. And believe me, there's some awkward moments,
Yeah.
when you're doing prayer requests and Weston stands up and asks for the microphone, everybody kind of holds their breath for a second. But if you can hang with them, there's going to be something so real and so profound. Not to put something on Weston that he's more profound than anybody else, but if you can just hang with him, his heart is going to bless you,
Mm,
but you have to invite him into the room.
yeah. How else can Christians, followers of Jesus, like grow in loving generously and like loving like Jesus,
Yeah.
the adults with IDD in our lives?
Yeah. It's interesting as hidden as adults with IDD are, it's also surprising to find at the same time that most people are only one or two or three people removed from someone with
Right.
a disability in their life. And that can also be a surprising thing to find. And a lot of people who end up volunteering at Reality Ministries are people who have a brother or an aunt or a cousin with a disability, and they've been impacted by that and know that that's the community they want to be part of too. I think, if you're local and you're listening to this podcast, come on over to Reality Ministries where you will be loved generously,
Mm,
as well as having the opportunity to love generously. Um, Beyond that, I would say where you go, keep your eyes open and don't shy away um, from opportunities or creating opportunities to engage in an authentic way with someone who is different from you. And that could be a person with IDD or a lot of other people that you might
right.
more likely cross paths with. Um, Special Olympics, I'm a huge fan of Special Olympics. Really easy to access in any community. Everybody has Special Olympics. They're always looking for coaches. They're always having games you can go and cheer. Um, yeah, just unfortunately, the church is not likely to be the place where you're going to find that access. But if you find a place in your community where people with disabilities are being centered and make a couple of friendships, you can bring those friends to church or go with them to their church. And that's where some real transformation can happen.
Love that. How about philanthropy? If you're talking with a donor, what would you say of why a follower of Jesus should give to Reality Ministries or to an organization like yours?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think that any space where belonging is assumed and all are welcome is a space that reflects the heart of Jesus. Um, I would that's those are the spaces I believe we should be looking for. Um, you mentioned earlier you were talking about joy, and I have experienced indescribable joy in my life at Reality Ministries. And when people walk in the door, that's often the first thing they say, or if they come for to volunteer a few times, they're always going to say the joy is just palpable. I've never danced so much. I've been afraid to sing other places, but I can sing here. Our very first T-shirt, our very first year said "Joy is contagious" because that just feels like it says a lot about reality. But what we've been discovering over the years is that joy is contagious, and so is grief, so is pain,
Hmm.
so is struggle. And those are also the things that we share at Reality Ministries. We are a beautiful thing about shared life with people with IDD is that it's not a community that moves around a lot. So an adult with IDD is not likely to move for a relationship or a job or school. And so the overwhelming majority of people who started with Reality Ministry 17 years ago are still here.
Mm.
And then every year more and more people are graduating from high school. And so more and more are coming in. But there's an opportunity for really life on life for a lifetime, which is such an incredible blessing and privilege. And so,
So what's the financial value of that?
I don't know if I can answer that. Like, if you don't know, I don't think I can tell you. But honestly, it's part of why
That
we don't,
well,
it
I
is not easy for us to get grants
mm,
because friendship is not very quantifiable.
yeah,
Like, we should actually did a survey, once, like, how many friends did you have before you came? How many friends do you have now?
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
which
yeah.
is it seems ridiculous, but, like, there's something deep within us that knows that knowing and being known is an inestimable value, and in my opinion, a really good place to invest.
Yeah, yeah. I love that answer, Susan, please forgive my snarky question. But I you know, I think Christian philanthropy at its best can be hospitality. And I think Christian philanthropy can be mercy. I think Christian philanthropy can be justice. I think Christian philanthropy. So I think we need to think through like the reality that the beautiful community that you have helped to build over these years also requires funding and that when business leaders foundations invest in reality ministries, I think they are leveraging their money for hospitality.
That's right.
And I think that is, the word hospitality is arguably the best word for Christian philanthropy. The roots of hospitality literally means, love of the stranger. And philanthropy is, the roots are love of your brother, philia anthropos. So like this idea that like philanthropy is this act of welcoming in a stranger who the
Mhm.
philanthropist will never meet potentially. Like hopefully your
Right.
donors are involved and they're volunteers, and some of them are, some of them aren't. Some of them
That's
are
right.
busy with other things. God has calling for their lives in other ways, and their role is to write the check because they have the
Yes.
capacity, and yet
Yes.
they are participating in this love of the stranger. So that's the way I see it.
1,000%. Yes. And I wanted to go back to what you said about salaries, and like I would say at Reality Ministries, we would all say, everyone on our staff would say, our friends with disabilities are our teachers and our guides. And our work is to defer to the wisdom of those friends. And our staff are the ones creating space where that can happen. And we're lucky at Reality because the the community once people are in the community, they just want more, more, more. That's certainly been my experience. So when we have a position open, there are so many people that want to come and be part of that because of the ways that it's impacted their own life. And 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 so I would like for you to give us money to be able to pay those people so that they can have a family and live in Durham and be faithful to this calling, um, that is so, in my opinion, really reflective of God's heart and of the
Mm.
kingdom of heaven.
And Susan, last question for you today. What are you learning in this season
Mm,
about what it means to love like Jesus?
yeah. I think it goes back to what I was just saying about, being present with one another and all the complexities of life. Um, People with IDD, by the time they are adults, have often experienced, a lot of rejection, bullying, sometimes abuse compared to the typical population, much greater levels of abuse, loss. Many of them are living with aging parents, and then their parents die. And then, I mean, I can tell you so many stories about that, and how it impacts individuals. And I believe that the spaces of hurt and isolation and suffering are the places where Jesus is present. And so, through my friends who have this kind of lived experience and yet are willing to be my friend and to share their hearts and their lives and their struggles and their joys with me, shows me the heart of Jesus in ways that I really can't describe. Um, so loving like Jesus, I'm learning, is seeing Jesus in my friends, seeing the way that they see Jesus in me when I don't, um, and living with gratitude into the community of belonging that we share.
Amen. Thank you, Susan. Thank you for your time today. Thank you for your service and for all that you've done for years. I know you're shaking your head, but I also know that being an executive director is really hard and that you're not just a participant in this wonderful community we've describing. You're also a leader of staff. You're also responsible for building this institution that we started talking about. And
Mhm.
so thank you for all that you've done for in building Reality Ministries and and thank you for sharing your wisdom with us today.
Yeah, and thank you so much for inviting me into this space and for creating a space where conversations like this can happen. And I think where the things that we're not thinking about, but that are really essential things to our flourishing and the flourishing of our wider community, can be centered and pondered. So thank you so much for that.
You can learn more about Reality Ministries at realityministriesinc.org. That's realityministriesinc.org, which we'll also put in the show notes. The invitation to grow this week is to text a friend who might be lonely for whatever reason and ask them to get coffee. If there's an adult with IDD in your life, consider texting them and finding a time to just hang out. If you have feedback on this episode, you can reach me at brian@simplecharity.org. Thanks for joining me on the Simple Charity podcast. Next time, I'll interview two remarkable young men who gave thousands of people clean water when they were just teenagers. I hope you'll join me as we continue to learn to love generously like Jesus. Have a great rest of your day.